In my presentation, I will talk about the experience in the committee membership. I am not going to talk about Finland too much, topical issues in Finland, but talk about my experience or our experience when we have been looking at the European crisis states or countries and the management of that crisis, and how the gender impacts have been taken into consideration in this work. The committee membership gives a unique perspective on the detailed discussions with these countries, their reports, and the measures taken or not taken. We have looked at earlier Greece, earlier Portugal, Spain, who have been under the custody, so to say, of EU and the Troika. And we have other countries with milder crises without the same mechanism, though, Lithuania, Slovenia, Slovakia, and so on. Unfortunately, I cannot tell about any best practices because the experience is not very positive. Well, Iceland will be included in February. Perhaps the narrative is more positive. On a general level, this seems that the crisis has impacted women above all, and so equality has gone back during the past few years. If economy is in a tight spot, it is clear that everybody needs to make savings, and it is understandable, but the policy measures taken have been disproportionate with the impact on women. The CEDAW Convention is an overall review of the situation. It covers all areas of society. So when we assess the adherence to the convention, we look at all areas of society, and the general view is quite good, or outlook is quite good. I have organized my speech so that I take examples of the various society areas. If we look at the world of work and social security, there the crisis is very clearly visible, and the gender impact assessment, or the lack thereof, is a great problem. Here, unemployment is a vast problem in the crisis countries, and normally the trend is as follows. In the early part, male unemployment grows rapidly when economy goes down, construction, industry face problems, but then savings take place, and they impact services and the public sector in particular, and then female or the impact on women is double, because some of the services are run and used by women. If we look at the employment measures, active employment measures taken, normally they are very male dominant. So the purpose is to find work for men, and then The next in line is youth unemployment, which is also very problematic in these countries, and they surpass women too. So female unemployment is not taken seriously. A second observation is that the non-discrimination clause in all countries, they are EU countries, they have valid EU legislation. It seems that it is very apparent, this non-discrimination clause. Let's say pregnancy or maternity-based discrimination is quite common, and human rights authorities in these countries consider or take this into consideration, but for a reason or another, no action is taken to prevent such discrimination. And also, even legislation is weakened in the name of employment. But the most evident problem or clearest problem is the fact that if you cut pensions uniformly, like 10% or 20% of everybody's pensions, so women's small pensions, because they have the particular work history, variable work history. So this targets women, also cuts in daycare, of course. If you look at healthcare and training or education, they have been objects of savings a lot, especially as concerns the concentration of health services. This is a very clear trend. Local points of care are discontinued, and for sexual and procreation services, they are crucial, and this is very visible in Central European and Southern European countries. During the crisis, the trained population has emigrated. In Sweden, I met a member of European Parliament, and they say that is very obvious that mobility of labor works well. We have 100 Greek doctors in Sweden, but what does that mean for the crisis country? What is also a problem? Well, let's say it's difficult to say this is a direct consequence of the crisis, but where does this value conservatism come from? This is very emphasized in national policy. It is concomitant. We don't know whether they are there might be a link, even if it is not so clear and obvious. But a good example of this is abortion, or the discussion or debate on abortion. It is now very topical in certain countries. We had Portugal a while ago in discussions within the committee. And in 2007, there was a referendum in Portugal on liberalized abortion. This is a Catholic country with a very tough attitude to abortion. In 2007, after the referendum, the decision was to liberalize abortion for as concerns the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. after the sort of a popular initiative last summer, there was a new legislation where abortion became no longer free, so against payment, and now to have abortion, you need to have had 4 consultations during the 10 first weeks of pregnancy. Psychology, medical, religious consultation has to be performed in order to get abortion or be granted abortion, and it is still an ongoing consideration for implementation, but this legislation is in force and shows how attitudes towards abortion has changed. This is not the only country. A second question discussed is prostitution, which during crisis becomes more general, is more frequent, and that the states in question do not, on the one hand, know about, they do not know when they are asked, and in other ways, on the other hand, they put the blame on the women who are involved, not so much the clients or the persons organizing prostitution. The most blatant example is Greece, where there were people or prostitutes diagnosed with AIDS or AIDS AV. So this tendency is seen elsewhere too. Family, or emphasis on family, is an interesting phenomenon. It seems like a counterattack against equality. And in various forms, the focus on family seems to be a factor opposing the females or the woman's independent position in family, like a tool for stamping on women's rights. In Portugal, women must wait for 1 year before remarrying after divorce. This is to know whether pregnancy that might be it can be clarified that the father is not the old husband. If we look at women and policy or politics, you could have expected that the situation would have created some sort of a women's movement, but alas, we have not seen so much of that. Only some general or generalized protest against the crisis policies. Women are involved, but not as a women's movement demand. And if we look at presentation of women at the parliament level or municipal councils in these countries, there's no big change, nothing as a decrease, but not as an increase either. What is very evident as a tendency is that the equity authorities have very much less resources the mainstreaming, assessment, budgeting officials, they have lost a lot of the resources. In part, this can be compensated with special projects, and in the past few years they have had to do with violence against women or trafficking. What can be seen very clearly is that female minority groups face very difficult situation. Roma, immigrant women, forced sterilization, even such reports, and many such reports. If we try to look for some light in this picture, the fact that so many countries are ratifying the Istanbul Convention, so the violence against women, the question about the violence against Christians has attracted more attention than before. Also at the legislation level, as the minimum, that it is criminalized even within the family, so domestic violence. This is a step forward, and also new attention to human trafficking has been seen. Another positive factor the legislative efforts related to gender identity issues. They're also under the pressure of EU, perhaps. There is some positive liberalization taking place. Talking with these countries, normally those countries where the Commission, the European Central Bank and International Monetary Fund have been involved dictating the policies. They have a bitter comment often. Why are they not here answering the questions? They were given so and so many weeks to take measures in the economy, cut the pensions. There was no chance to make an assessment, a gender assessment. Well, the question is why not afterwards, and how much was it required? In our reports, we have pointed that out, saying that we are aware that these policies have been impacted by the European institutions, and we have said that the European treaties prescribe that in all European actions, equality is an ongoing objective, and we have proposed for these countries, or to these countries, that the European Union would participate in the assessment of impacts and would rectify also the consequences or damages caused. So I think that the European member state crisis in the economies offer us a lesson to learn. the assessment of economic impacts would be very necessary, and in Finland we should avoid those mistakes already made. There are very many mistakes made.
Kiitoksia.